There are plenty of A-list celebrities whose pointless screen time makes the blue screen impossible to watch. But fortunately, for every big A-hole star, there is a supporting actor who actually makes the movie. Oftentimes, you wouldn't even know their names, and we're here to change that. Meet Brion James, the villain you will never forget. I would bother you just a little with Brion's biography. After all, you arrived at this video to learn how Brion James became one of the best supporting actors back in the golden days when movies were made right. He was born back in 1945 in Redlands, California. His father was a US Army serviceman who later owned a movie theater, which gave Brion early exposure to films and lifelong passion for acting. Later on, Brion's family moved to Beaumont, California, where he grew up on a farm. Westerns was exactly why Brion got into the business, and all he ever wanted to do was to play gangsters and cowboys in the movies. There is a lot of confusion about what Brion's first TV or movie role was, and I will try to limit my contribution to this vast pool of misinformation. To find Brion in his early roles, you will need two things: a rather large magnifying glass and a ton of patience. Luckily for you, I have both in spades. Brion's career started in the theater after he attended San Diego State University, where he was active in acting and theater arts. Then he moved to New York City in the late 1960s to pursue his craft, performing off-Broadway productions while studying acting with Stella Adler, paying for his tuition by working as her cook and her butler.
Another cold day in hell.
Brion's film debut took place on television back in 1974. Much like many future stars, it was either in a cheap product commercial
Kills germs. The germs that can give you bad breath, see? And it lasts, you understand?
or a big rate TV series, playing somebody in the fifth row, sixth from the left, often mumbling something off-screen.
What'd you say? Huh?
And if he was lucky, he would share prime screen time with the star of the show, though likely facing away from the camera to avoid upsetting the big shot by having somebody else in the frame. Still, that would be a dream role, being that close to the front row. Brion's first few roles were minor and mostly supporting, just enough to get his foot into the industry. Whether it was playing a cocky cowboy at the bar in 1975 Gunsmokes as Joe Barnes,
A man don't drink no red wine. How about a shot of this?
a loony racist redneck in 1974 Get Christy Love as Trenton Harper, or, as mentioned earlier, making it to the front seat and pretending to be an air traffic controller in 1974 The FBI, posing like he knew what the hell he was doing.
Go ahead, point, sir.
Some sources claim even earlier work in TV series, but either he was nothing more than a blur on film, or it's just a bogus information. I'll stick to what can be visually confirmed. Speaking of visual confirmation, IMDb claims that Brion's first big screen appearance was in Hard Times. I have watched it back and forth, up and down few times, but have yet to find any grain of pixel resembling Brion James. He supposedly played a small uncredited role as a random man. It's possible that he was cut from the final version of the film, so for now I have my doubts about his involvement in Hard Times, unless someone can provide visual proof that he made it into the final cut.
In Hard Times.
Brion's actual first movie role was in the Kansas City Massacre in 1975. To be fair, the Kansas City Massacre was a made-for-television movie, not a theatrical release. It aired as part of ABC's Movie of the Week series and is a crime drama about the infamous Kansas City Massacre. The film was produced specifically for the television, so it never played in theaters. At the time, Brion was building a reputation for taking on tough guy or villainous roles in crime dramas and action films. With good connections to casting agents who saw his potential for playing intense, hard-edged characters, and thanks to his naturally rugged appearance, directors saw him as a good fit for the role in crime or historical dramas like Kansas City Massacre. While the role itself was not a huge breakthrough for Brion, it marked the beginning of the typecasting problem that followed him throughout his entire career. Between 1975 and early 1980s, most of Brion's roles were clustered around low-budget TV series and TV movies, often limited to 1 or 2 episodes at most. By 1981, he was so disappointed with the way his career was going that he began questioning his future in acting. he wasn't achieving the level of success he had hoped for. The unpredictability of the industry left him feeling uncertain about his career trajectory. Everything changed overnight when he received a call from Blade Runner casting director Mike Fenton, who was looking for someone to play a particularly complex role, a replicant with a childlike confusion but dangerous tendencies. Brion's unique look and ability to portray both menace and vulnerability made him a strong candidate for the role of Leon Kowalski. Originally, Leon was meant to be a black guy, played by Frank McRae, but Ridley Scott was wondering, what if Leon was white? Brion's agent was smart enough to say that he has white Frank McRae in mind, a biker, scary-looking badass.
Hey!
Mind you, before the audition, Brion just had been in a car accident that had left him with various scars and bruises. When Brion was invited to audition, Ridley Scott's secretary was there too and watched Brion reading the scene. By the end of reading, Ridley asked Katie, the secretary, what does she think? And here is what she said: "He scared the crap out of me." Brion left the office, and before he made it back home, he got the role of Leon.
I already had an IQ test this year.
During the fight scene with Harrison Ford, Brion was supposed to pick him up, then put him down, and then slap him. Ridley Scott did not know how to end the scene, so Brion said, "Look, I've almost beaten this guy to death, so let me wake him up and tell him that I'm gonna kill him." And that is when the famous improvised line came out.
Wake up! Time to die.
Little known fact that since very early in Brion's career, he always did own stunt fighting. Harrison Ford used stunt double, but after learning that Brion was doing his own stunts, decided to give it a shot as well. So, both of them were real deal during the scene in Blade Runner. The offer to play Leon Kowalski in Blade Runner came at a pivotal time, giving him a chance now to take on larger and more memorable roles. The Blade Runner movie underwent a long and complex post-production process, including Ridley Scott's unique vision for its visuals and tone, which left the final cut mystery to some of the cast. For Brion, attending the pre-screening was a moment of anticipation and validation after the uncertainty he had felt early in his career. Blade Runner initially received mixed reviews and did not perform as expected at the box office, which was disappointing to everybody including Brion. Fortunately, his performance was well noted, and since he wasn't the leading star of the film, it had no negative effect on his career. Over time, the film gained cult status and became regarded as a sci-fi classic, with his role as Leon Kowalski becoming one of his most celebrated performances. Brion would often say that I'm a character actor, so I don't take the hit if the movie's bad, the lead does. So, I don't want to be the lead. He takes the hit, I don't. Blade Runner became a turning point for Brion James, as his performance gained recognition and opened doors for more significant roles in both film and television. His portrayal of Leon as conflicted, childlike yet dangerous replicant earned him lasting acclaim and helped him move past the frustration that he had experienced up until this point. Also, it solidified his image as an ultimate bad guy, as he would say that I was big and a lot of the stars were much smaller, so if you're big and mean looking, you play a bad guy. After Blade Runner, Brion became the meanest guy in Hollywood. The next big splash was 48 Hours, released in 1982, featuring established Hollywood star Nick Nolte and emerging superstar Eddie Murphy. By the time 84 Hours was casting, Brion James had already built an impressive portfolio of supporting roles in television and films, showcasing his talent for playing tough, intimidating characters. Director Walter Hill, known for casting actors with strong physical presence, took notice of James' previous work, especially his role in Blade Runner. Hill had a reputation for casting actors who could embody the rough criminal elements of his films, and he was very much eager to populate the world of 48 Hours with gritty, tough characters who felt dangerous and unpredictable. Obviously, James was the perfect fit for the vision. In 48 Hours, he was cast as Ben, a corrupt cop with a shady past. The film was a box office hit, earning more than 6 times its budget. It grossed close to $80 million domestically. Everyone was basking in glory, and for Brion, this was his moment to shine.
Yes?
They
they couldn't like each other less.
To hack with typecasting, he was going to have a lot of fun perfecting his look. He made one promise to himself: "You may not remember my name, but you will never forget the villain I play." For the next 5 years, Brion hopped from one TV series to another, landing nearly 30 supporting roles in A to B list productions.
Just put it on my tab.
I swear, I think those boys were behind the door when brains were passed out.
In 1987, he finally made it to the big league, sharing screen time with Arnold Schwarzenegger and James Belushi in the action movie Red Heat.
How do you Soviets deal with all the tension and stress? Vodka.
While it was a minor role, Brion brought a specific flair to the character. The glossy shoes and over-the-top suit, those were his ideas.
And I ain't telling you easy.
Just a few minutes on screen and the audience was in love with this greasy, slick-haired, low-level criminal. Now that's how one should portray a villain on screen. Red Heat became an international sensation, and so did Brion.
I need cooperation. Sure. Whatever you say, Gumby.
In 1989, yet another success landed for Brion James in supporting role, Tango and Cash. This time, he was sharing the screen with the superstars Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell. The role of Napoleon was both hilarious and terrifying, something Brion was a master at. Sometimes you couldn't help but feel pity for his characters.
What's the plan, eh? I like this. The view's great up here.
In Tango and Cash, they had a Russian director, Andrei Konchalovsky, and Brion asked if he could do a Cockney accent of the character because he does accents very well.
Bloody done.
Brion said about himself that he is like a parrot, can pick up an accent and just do it. By the way, a Cockney accent is a traditional working-class accent associated with East London, particularly the areas surrounding the East End. For example, you would drop an H in words starting with H, so house becomes house. Or drop in letter T, so bottle becomes bottle. Stallone and Russell picked up on the idea and it worked.
Bloke with me in prison, he's a governor. Yeah, where's he now? Where's the governor?
But the real reason Brion suggested that is to ensure that he can stay with the film as long as possible, pretty much the entire movie. Brion had a good nose for how to lobby for himself once you get on a big show like Tango and Cash. He did 14 weeks on the film and it made him a lot of money. Also, it was one of the biggest pirated films in the history of Russia. As Brion joked, most of his characters rarely lived until the closing credits rolled, but he didn't complain. It was much more fun playing a criminal than hero. While on the press tour for another 48 Hours movie, Brion mentioned that this is the first sequel that he has ever made because he rarely lived through the film.
Fubar, big time.
Throughout most of the 90s, Brion's career took a dip due to changes in the Hollywood direction. Action heroes were fading out and he faced more difficulties landing roles in high-end productions.
Maybe.
That was until 1995 when director Luc Besson began his search for actors for the role of Mr. Zorg.
Mr. who?
Mr. Zorg.
Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg.
Yes, Brion was first considered for the role of Mr. Zorg, but it was Gary Oldman who ultimately made the cut. However, Luke absolutely wanted Brion to have a part, and General Monroe was just the character he was made for.
General Monroe. Nice apartment, Major.
Actually, General Monroe character was created by Luke specifically for Brion, ensuring that he had place in the film.
You rigged the contest?
As always, Brion delivered an unforgettable persona that is as memorable as Corbin Dallas, Mr. Zorg, or Lee Lu, however you want to spell it. By the way, for General Monroe, the crew initially had a different vision for the character's look, but Brion worked with the makeup and costume departments to craft the specific appearance, giving General Monroe the clean-cut, military look with his slicked back hair and sharp uniform. Considering Luc Besson was a big control freak on the set, I would imagine this didn't go without Luc's blessings first. After The Fifth Element, Brion James continued to work steadily in film and television, though he did not achieve the same level of fame as some of his co-stars. New generations demanded different heroes and the rugged type was no longer in fashion. He was fortunate to land a few voice-over roles in animations and games, but nothing as spectacular as his last big hit.
Yeah, I'm a forklift operator now.
While he may not have become a household name, Brion James earned a cult following among fans of science fiction and action films. His performances, especially in Blade Runner and The Fifth Element, were well regarded and contributed to his legacy in genre cinema. Unfortunately, in the late 1990s, Brion James faced health problems, including a battle with heart issues, which impacted his ability to work consistently. Brion was often cast as a villain due to his imposing stature, deep voice, and ability to portray intensity. However, he was more than just a bad guy actor. His roles often displayed a range that included touches of vulnerability and complexity. He was known for making small roles memorable, adding depth to even the most minor characters. His deep, gravelly voice, imposing presence, and ability to bring a unique intensity to his roles made him a standout in genre films, particularly the science fiction and action. Despite often playing secondary characters, his performances were memorable, earning him a place as a familiar face among fans of the genre in which he frequently appeared. Brion James had a prolific career spanning over 160 film and television appearances, and he built a reputation as one of the most reliable character actors of his time. He passed away from the heart attack at the age of 54 in 1999. Brion James will be remembered for his iconic roles and contributions to numerous films of the 80s and 90s. His ability to bring gravitas and menace to his performance left a lasting impact, particularly in the sci-fi and action genres. Though often cast in supporting roles, his performances were pivotal, and he remains the favorite among fans of classic genre films. Brion agreed to play villains but promised that you would never forget them. Brion never played a villain with no redeemable quality about them. In other words, he didn't want to be an evil for the sake of evil. Brion didn't want to be just another Jason slasher. There was no point in that. I play out negative fantasies for people. I'm the guy people love to hate. And they always remember the bad guy. Brion James.